Our fieldwork experience is to Canadian Bay Cove in Mount Eliza. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. The fieldwork is in the area of geography and focuses on Level 2. Canadian Bay Cove is one of the many coastal locations throughout the Mornington Peninsula with Aboriginal middens. The middens were used by Aboriginals to discard food waste such as shells, bones and botanical material. The venue is 1 kilometre off the school and is located in the community where students live and play. The area is home to our First Nations people called the Boonwurrung. Students will develop an understanding of how people are connected to places and how places change over the time. This is supported through the inclusion of a traditional custodian of the land. Students collect primary data in the field, interpret it, and make conclusions regarding how the beach was used by our First Nation people, making connections from how they may use the beach. Through the landscape, students make connections to the availability of food and the impact of seasons. They also develop an understanding of how our First Nation people live sustainably on the land. We aim for students to develop a sense of wonder, curiosity and respect for places, people, cultures and the environment. Also the ability to think geographically and the capacity to be competent, critical and creative users. The fieldwork addresses key geography questions. What are places like? How and why are people connected to place? What makes a place special? And how we can care for places. And cross-curriculum priorities, learning about Aboriginal histories and cultures and sustainability. Through fieldwork, we immerse children in the skills of geography, questioning and reflecting through authentic learning experiences, helping to build on learners' critical and creative thinking through the development of their own questions, coming up with possibilities, and using reasoning to draw conclusions.
This trip will immerse students into the human aspect of geography. It will explore the importance of population distribution, sustainability, the use of resources, and the importance of country to Indigenous communities. ACRA identifies that there is a significant importance of including fieldwork as a learning opportunity within geography, as it can be an indispensable opportunity to apply concepts and inquire mythology in a real-life setting for our students. Inquiry is incorporated into our trip by providing students with opportunities to question and reflect on their roles and relationship with the environment and the people who live in it. This will be achieved through exposure to learning connections between Aboriginal peoples and the Level 2 curriculum outcome of why country place is important to Aboriginal peoples and the way in which they maintain special connections to a particular place. The ability to make their own connections to the past, ask questions and draw conclusions is fundamental to assisting our students also build their creative and critical capabilities through this excursion. These skills are not only cross-curriculum strands within the Victorian curriculum, but encourage students to appreciate and interpret the standpoints of others, allowing them to gain a sense of empathy. Students are then guided to further appreciate sustainability. Students can be questioned on ways we now find or grow food, social issues, so talking about changes to the Aboriginal community post-settlement in Australia, environmental challenges, so how has the weather, time and effects of settlement impacted the Victorian coastline and the middens that rest there now? Furthermore, evidence shows that field experiences can give students the opportunity to develop a range of geographic skills. These skills include student mapping skills and recognising how directions and scale are incorporated into these. These skills will ensure students develop a sense of spatial literacy. They can be adaptable to other areas of study that students will need for current or future learning needs, such as numeracy. Here we can see the Level 2 outcomes within the Victorian curriculum: collect, check and classify data and interpret simple maps of familiar locations are incorporated here. The overall positives of this field trip are a natural fit for backyard learning. We're ensuring students are learning in a local context and creating a tangible experience between both what is learnt in the classroom and put into practice on this trip. Economically speaking, there will be little to no costing for this trip as the location is within 1 kilometre of the school. We will need to ensure there is a classroom teacher, teacher's aide and parental volunteers available for each mixed class. 1 adult per 4 students. Now, as we're expecting 30 students involved, parents will be advised of the excursion through a permission slip detailing the location, time and place, and welcome to volunteer as well. A donation to the Boonwurrung Land Council Corporation for their involvement will also be essential. Now, the potential impacts of this trip that could affect how efficient and effective this excursion will be the perspectives of non-Indigenous teachers. So it's important as teachers we consider and respect how the content we're exploring is culturally sensitive to our traditional landowners. We also need to understand what prerequisite skills are needed for this learning experience and where our students currently have any gaps in learning. For example, understanding how to read a map. We also need to address diversity. So how accessible is this excursion for all students involved, not just physically, but in terms of understanding the learning outcomes? Lastly, pandemic impacts. So it is possible this trip could be cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. Teachers could consider planning another option, such as a virtual excursion via an ICT class in the future.
The learning activity sits within a learning sequence and are built upon key principles of the universal design of learning, high-impact teaching strategy of differentiation, and key dispositions associated with skillful discussants. This is to support all learners. Our task engagement activity involves learners walking to the fieldwork location using previously prepared maps. This engages learners in attentive activity and supports the consolidation of directional and mapping terminology. Our first activity involves students developing an understanding of why place is important and how people are connected to different places. Students will be welcomed by a traditional custodian of the land in a welcome to country ceremony. Through discussions, students will be introduced to Middens and in groups reflect on the way our First Nation people are connected to the land. In our second activities, learners participate in a coastal curiosity walk in small groups, discussing, identifying and documenting elements of the coastal landscape, including Middens. Groups formulate and construct their own inquiry question from the scaffolding prompt, I wonder, using the data collected on their walk as evidence to their chosen inquiry question. This inquiry moves from a traditional bonded inquiry approach towards a more open inquiry, which makes this learning experience a suitable one for Level 2. In the final activity of the day, students listen to and ask questions about the way Aboriginal seasons differ to the ones we use today, and how the seasons impacted our First Nations people movements. Learners are also introduced to elements of sustainable living in relation to the Middens. Students then reevaluate the landscape and Middens using this new information and forming new concepts, applying new knowledge. The fieldwork involves working together collaboratively, building learners' social and personal capabilities, supporting learners to develop the skills needed to work successfully together, such as active listening, being open to others' ideas and thinking, making compromises, and valuing logic and reason. In organising the activities, a variety of considerations will take place. Prior to the field trip, teachers will undertake a risk assessment of the area, including issues around working near water and unstable cliffs, and road safety. We'll ensure we have the appropriate ratios, take head counts, and follow current COVID-safe and sun-smart protocols. We'll seek the necessary approvals required when engaging in learning around our First Nations people. We'll also ensure we have each student's permission slip, up-to-date medical information and contacts, and bring with us the required first aid equipment. An itinerary will communicate a clear understanding of the learning and running of the day, with activity timeframes ranging from 45 minutes to 1 hour and 15 minutes. This experience has minimal cost, with expenses mainly relating to that of student material and resources on the day.
Resources that will be used to support the experience include the input from traditional landowners. They can introduce students to new perspectives and meanings. We need to ensure that First Nation perspectives are incorporated. ICT, there will be an iPad per group. Medical supplies, so all supervising adults must be first aid trained. Scaffolding and prompt sheets, as well as teacher aids to support students with further learning needs. Now, our strategy to ensure we're inclusive of all students includes the universal design for learning and differentiation. So UDL is the proactive approach for us to create learning experiences inclusive of all students. These three key aspects include multiple means of representation, so students have the option of both ICT technology through their recording options, which can then be used for future classroom use to include subtitles. The prompt sheets we're using have explicit plain language, and students have the option to also respond to their task either through video recording, photo recordings, or logging their responses in a journal. Now, differentiation, the explicit content sheets for students are available. We also have another option for students who may be ahead of their work. They can work alone on their reflective journal and record their observations. Now, parents will be involved in the day as well. They can assist teachers by handing out the scaffolding sheets. They can also assist with the first aid plan, and most importantly, they'll be involved in contributing to the school newsletter, so providing highlights of the trip along with other students. Now, the assessment items related to the fieldwork experience include the defining of a conceptual base. So we need to ensure students develop the ability to think geographically. So our conceptual base in terms of this trip will be the Canadian Bay Cove, having students think about the impacts of weather and time, the environment, so why is it important to protect natural landmarks, and the interconnection of traditional landowners and the dream time. Lastly, we're supporting summative assessment through reflective learning. Students are engaging in the process through a fostering of a deep learning by thinking about how and what they have learnt through this reflective journal.